Welcome, everyone. We are so happy that you are joining us today, and I'm very excited to introduce our guest, Helane Marie Anderson. And Helane is a transformational voice coach, singer, pianist, sound healer, musician, composer, energy healer, author, multi-instrumentalist, and teacher. Her unique style of working with sound blends her years of studying healing modalities with contemporary music and sound healing. LA Yoga Magazine states, Helane Marie Anderson sings like an angel, taking you into the celestial world with her voice, paired with crystal singing bowls, chimes, and alchemical bowls. Based on her unique journey through a performing arts career that eventually led her down a healing path, Helane's book and transformational voice program, You Are Meant to Sing, 10 Steps to Unlock Your Inner Voice, combines her training and background into focused work with the voice. Welcome, Helane.
Thanks, Phyllis.
It's so wonderful to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, as always. So, I'm really excited about this interview today and being part of the Shift Network and the summit and all of the positive benefits of sound.
Well, beautiful. Now, you titled your presentation as The Power of Singing, Sound, Story, and Silence. So can you tell us a little bit about what that means to you, and then maybe how it applies to the work that you do?
Yes, great question. I think singing is something that's inherent to all of us. I think there are a lot of people who think, oh, I have a terrible singing voice, or they don't think that they have a voice, so they never sing, or they sing in private, or they never really share it, or never sing at all. And the voice is really the biggest vehicle we have to move energy in the body, to shift energy in the body, to use the vibrational element of it. It's our own instrument. So actually everybody has a voice and a singing voice. And the other words or story around it, then moving into story, are just judgments, and they're self-judgments. And what's really interesting to me when I work with people, even especially the people who don't consider themselves a singer, of how much shifts in their life when they start to shift the story around how they use their voice, whether it's even speaking or singing, and how important it is, because the power of the voice and the sound that comes from the voice, it's really truly the original sound healing instrument is the voice. It's what we have that's within us. It doesn't require anything external. And in my experience, it's also the instrument that's a direct connection to the soul. It's a direct connection to who you are and the essence of who you are. And so it's really immaterial whether you were gifted with a beautiful voice or you were just gifted with a voice in general, because the voice itself is a gift. So it's learning how to work with it. And then on the flip side, it's also not just singing, it's how you speak, how you use your words, how you use your actions, and how much power your voice has when you start to shift how you tell the story of things that happen to you, how you shift your perception of things that happen in the external environment. And then further to that, when you're working with sound in general, it's really important, and it's one of the things that I teach everyone who works with me, or make sure that they really step into this place of deep listening, which happens during the silence. And so it's taking the silence for integration, the silence for pause in the sound, because music in general, sound, singing, all of that relates in the music category, is all spatial. It's all spatial. Music exists in time and space. And so when you're dealing with music, silence is just as important as when you're actually creating the music. And the silence and the pauses is also the profundity of integration. However long or short the silences are, they're done when they're done with intention and done with this space of listening. It's really deep what can happen within the body and the mind.
Can you share a little bit about because there's such an evolution to your work, because I know that you primarily work with voice, but can you share with us how you arrived at this point, really, about maybe a little bit about the evolution of your process and how you began to do this work and have your training course and so forth, about helping other people find their voice?
Yes, absolutely. When I was younger, I used to sing all the time, and I write about this some in my book as well, but it was really hard to get me to be quiet. I was always loud, I was always singing, I always wanted to share my voice. Like, there were all these stories when I was a little kid. I used to go up to strangers in the grocery store and ask if I can sing and dance for them, and just start randomly singing and dancing for strangers in the grocery store. But my mother was so disconnected from her own voice that instead of thinking it was funny, it was kind of as if she'd be embarrassed by me, like when I was younger. And so like I developed this sort of lack of trust in how I shared my voice, but I think it was always inherent that I wanted to share my voice. And so because I had that little bit of trepidation and fear that was created from those moments when I was younger, I still kept singing, and I'd sing in choirs and I'd do the solo, but I always had this prevalent voice in my head when I talk about those voices or shifting the story that said, oh, well, I'm not really good enough, or I shouldn't be too loud, or it would just be these voices of judgment. So I naturally gravitated towards classical music, which, if any of you are classical musicians that are watching this, very much when you go in a classical music regimen, it's very precise and very perfectionism oriented and very exact. And so that part of my brain that was constantly in the criticism mode actually resonated with that type of music making, where it was very clear. And also what I did was, instead of really focusing on the singing as my primary thing, I focused on the piano as my primary thing. And part of it was because, behind the piano I can hide a little bit. So it was like I could play the piano and then I'm not as exposed, because when you share your voice, you're really exposed. You have to be vulnerable. Like, it's like the true vulnerability when you share your voice. And so holding that space for people to really open their voice, it just kind of transpired from these experiences in myself, because I put so much time and effort into the piano, and then I would sing. I always took voice lessons and I always sang, but I was like, I'm a pianist who sings. I'm not a singer that plays. I was just very much this identity of judgment that was around singers in the classical music world, of being more flighty, and it was just, no, I'm a pianist, I'm more intellectual or something. It was just stupid, like it was a stupid identity thing. The story I was telling myself when I was younger, aside from the fact that I loved to sing and play at the same time, and I would do it, but I somehow was detached from the joy of music making, because I was still stuck in the perfectionism element of it. And so as I went through my career, I decided, okay, I'm not good enough to be at the level I want to be at, meaning like the level to teach at a major university or tour or something. But I was a good pianist. I was a good singer. But in that realm, it was more like, okay, I don't know. So I'm going to go into the business route of it, because I'm really good at that side of things. So I instead decided to get my master's in arts administration, and then ended up building my career in that direction. And as I was leaving, like I actually was artistic administrator at the Los Angeles Philharmonic, and used to program concerts at Disney Hall and the Hollywood Bowl. And I thought it was my dream job, but when I got there, I realized that it took everything out of me, so I had nothing creative left, and I actually didn't sing. And so a funny part of that story that I actually share in my book is that I felt really called to go to this Kundalini class. And mind you, during this whole time, I still felt like callings to do the healing work, and like got my Reiki certification, I got my yoga teaching certification, but I was always like, that's my hobby, that's not my work, that's my hobby, and so I felt this very big differentiation around it. And then it just started to shift in me, and it was mostly after my father passed away, and that was in 2007, and I started to just feel a shift. And it was while I was working at the Los Angeles Philharmonic, and then it was how my voice shut down. So we come back around to that Kundalini yoga class, and we were singing in the class, and this person next to me was like, wow, you have a really beautiful voice. And I was like, rawr. Like, I realized, like, she's giving me a compliment and I can't, like, I can't even receive it because I was so mad at myself for not listening to that voice. So my inner child was like, rawr, why are you saying I have a nice voice? So I was like, oh, and just like, why aren't you singing? And so, yeah, it's just funny in retrospect. And so as I started to open up my voice again, which I very much credit, I went through a lot of healing arts classes and polarity therapy and craniosacral therapy and all of these classes. And then I finally realized that, like, no, I needed to be working with my voice. I needed to be working with sound. And in all of my process, I went and did the training program at the Globe Institute in San Francisco area, in the Bay Area. And so I had such a beautiful experience there that I felt like my voice opened up. And I felt in a lot of times during my deep processing of my own wounds and traumas that had happened, that I wanted to create a program or a way for people to get there faster, because I didn't really have, I had like tidbits here or a session here or something else, but I didn't have a real guide that was explaining to me what happens when you go through a shift, like explaining to me the healing crisis, explaining to me the detox element of it, or like the deep work when you're working with mantras and you are changing your story, that there is a purge element to the mantra, like that actually the universe doesn't give you what you want right away. It shows you all of the things you've been doing that's keeping you from that thing first, so that you can learn how to shift where those patterns or your choices have been showing up in your daily life. And so my real intention behind it was that I created and my intention was to create a safe space for people to move through that more quickly. And in my experience, in a lot of the people I work with and my own work with myself, is that I mix Sanskrit mantras sometimes, and then I will create my own and help the client create one to get to the essence of a shift of what it is they're experiencing. But the real power is in holding the space for that client to go through, or for people to go through the true process of what it takes to move through a major shift in their life. And so that was really the basis of it, because some of that process took me 9 years, and I wanted to create a space where people could do it. And everyone who has been disciplined about it and done it for the 40 days in the process and the context of the space holding has had a really major shift in their life. And so it's with the power of the voice and the power of sound and holding that space. And what I see is, like, I'm not healing people. I'm holding space as the witness for their transformation, because that's what people, when you use your voice in this way and you're very intentional and very guided and very specific, that actually that ripple effect happens and goes out to everything in their life. So yeah, that's the basis of how I developed the program and the way that I work with people.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That is so beautiful, and just also stating that it's not necessarily this quick fix, that it's really, we're always on a journey, or there's really a process that's unfolding. And I think that for the majority of people, your story resonates, because, and even within myself, that points within our life where we feel like we don't have a voice, or we feel like our voice has been muted in some way. And so I think everyone can really resonate with that. And I think that's what's so beautiful about the way that you work, in that you're helping people to shift out of that old paradigm and to really recreate their life and find out who they truly are, to find their true voice. And I think that's really beautiful. Can you share maybe a deeper understanding of how using our voice helps to create that, well, to create that internal way of being?
Yes, for sure.
That maybe like a higher level or higher way of being.
Yes, and I think of it, one of the things that you just said first, I want to answer and then get into the voice, is that I come at it from a slightly, like, I don't want people to see me as like a guru type mentality. It's like I am just a guide to hold space for, like what you said, like each person's individual vocal empowerment, because I really encourage my students to hear what I have to say, hear how I work, and then decide what of it might resonate with them and what of it might resonate in a different space. And it's really important. So it is that cultivation of the voice. So when you translate it to singing, it's usually like when people feel like they're struggling in their speaking voice or their singing voice, it's because they're not using the breath properly. And the breath is really comes from the diaphragm. It comes from this muscle that's like based under the rib cage. And most people don't know that they have it when they're having problems with the voice, right? And so, and you know this, you're also a beautiful singer, and we've worked together, and that vibration that's created, it amplifies intention. So when you add the vibrational element of the voice with the mantra and with the practice, you're actually amplifying the intention of what you're calling in. And when I teach people this and how you use the diaphragm and how you're allowing the breath to drop and how you get the support from underneath, and I always give reverence, because I think both breath work and pranayama are beautiful practices. It's just that they're the opposite of what you do for singing. And so, you know, those practices of pulling the diaphragm up and in, they don't work when you're singing. They actually will cut off your air supply. And so I would say it's like cross-training gymnastics or something. You know, it's like you those practices are really beautiful, but then you're cross-training the diaphragm to then like do a different thing on the out breath than maybe what you're used to. Because I've had a lot of yogis that I've worked with, or just people in general, that think that breathing is breathing into the chest, and if you do that when you're singing, you don't ever get your full support with the breath. And then when you are adding the extra vibration of the voice itself, it's beyond the mantra, where you allow the vibration of the voice to help center the mind. And so one of the very basic exercises I give people to practice is just when you, and just to say this very simply, and it may seem counterintuitive, especially for any of you watching that regularly do Mula Bandha or pranayama practice, or if you do a lot of breath work, because it's the opposite of the way that you breathe in those practices. And those practices are very powerful. But when you sing, you always want to you actually expand on the out breath. So it seems counterintuitive, but that's how you allow yourself to have the breath support and the flow. And so when the diaphragm has that much control, it's almost like you're suspended, and that's how you can hold the notes for so long. And so what happens to me is, like, when you train people, it's like I'm pushing out on the out breath, out on the out breath, out on the out breath, to the point where sometimes I even crack my back, because it's like, oh, it's working. So it's how you're tapping into that internal vibrational resonance. And so for any of you watching this whole summit, right, we're talking about the power of sound, and you have this level of power of sound within you. Like, just think of like what you are getting just from the singing bowls, especially for those of you that don't sing or haven't been singing, is that you have that within you to like tap into that vibrational force. And that's how you start to do it. So if I just like did a quick demo, if I breathe in here, and you see, like, I just breathe right into the diaphragm muscle there, and then it all expands on the back and the side. And then when I hum out, and I'm just continuing to expand this part of my body on the out breath. So it's not I'm pulling in, like a lot of people will have a tendency to do based on those other practices. It's actually the opposite. It's you're expanding outward on the out breath, because you're creating more space. And so that's how you start to build up that resonant chamber. And then beyond that, that trust of intention setting. And when you practice that kind of humming, at least for me, I find it incredibly meditative. And when you start to do it and you feel that buzz in the front of your face, the idea is that many people, or if many of you have problems where you feel a little choked up or you get tired when you're talking for long periods of time during the day, it's because you're putting a lot of pressure on the vocal cords themselves. And so this part should always remain relaxed. And you'll see it move because the vocal cords are definitively vibrating, but you don't want to tense it or taut in the throat, like where a lot of people do that. And when you're doing that, you're actually putting pressure on your vocal cords, which are meant to be like the strings over the bridge of the violin. They're meant to just have space to resonate. And so when you are tensing up your neck and you're doing that kind of extra thing, when you're doing that, you're actually cutting off your breath flow. So it's a really important thing to keep in mind. And that's where you can kind of really just start to resonate. And beyond that, and beyond the mantra practice and beyond the simple vocal exercises, it's being able to tap in and allow the body and the mind to speak for itself. So often I will guide people into like, where do you tap in? Like, what part of your body is talking right now? And like, how do you want it to express itself? And so it gets beyond like whether it's just blah or blah, blah or however it comes out. It's this idea that when you start to do that, you start to trust that your voice can make funny noises. It can move in whatever way it's being called to move. And that's kind of the beauty of it, is that you have this instrument that's with you all the time, and you can like access it. I don't know, it makes me excited because it's sort of, people don't realize like, and one of the things when I've done workshops before is I always ask people, the first question I ask is like, how many of you are singers? And, depending on the crowd, it may be a lot of people in the room or it may be just a few people in the room. And then I'm like, okay, how many of you sing in the shower? And then like, most of the hands come up and they're like, who sings in your car when you're by yourself? And then by that point, you got most everyone's hand like comes up, because it's like everyone sings. It's just this sort of pervasive judgment around it. And I always say, if you really watch indigenous cultures around the world, you'll see like everyone sings, everyone dances, everyone whatever. And there's just not that pervasive thought pattern of, oh, I'm not good, I'm not going to do it. It's like, it kind of doesn't exist. It's more just like, everyone does that. It's not about judgment, but the people that are more gifted at the thing maybe the person that uses their voice for healing, or maybe the person that leads, or maybe the person that's that, but there's not that pervasiveness of judgment the same way that there is in Western culture. And so I feel like a little bit of it is the work I do is kind of combating that to help hold the space for people to feel more confident in expressing their individual voice. Whether they end up singing in front of public or not is not really the point. The point is that when you're practicing from this vibrational state in your being and you start to like, this is literally in the chakras, this is your power center, this is the solar plexus, it all comes from here. So if your voice is shut down in any way, then you're not fully in your power yet. So just this practice alone, even just the humming beyond the mantra, is going to help you access this power center that we all have within us.
That's beautiful, and it's so important for people to understand that they don't, the best instrument that they actually have is what you came in here with, which is your voice, and that the vibrational mechanism of that to kind of promote healing and release. But also, I love that you actually talk about the importance of the breath, because the breath itself is moving energy. Mm-hmm. Do you have because I know that you've talked about your past, and I know you work with clients and so forth, but do you have maybe a story of transformation that you can share about how you changed, or how did the use of the voice change a circumstance?
I have a few, and there are two particular past clients that come to mind, and one of them worked with me for about a year. And she had also studied voice and was en route to be an opera singer at the University of Southern California, which is a prestigious music school. And I actually teach a class there still in arts leadership and entrepreneurship. That's like one connection I have to that part of my life from before. And she then ended up doing what, was her family safe route, and ended up going into marketing and went the business route, had a very prestigious job at Google, and also was just feeling very generally frustrated. And as she was going through and shifting, and she had felt shut down from her musical voice, and she also used to DJ some, and she would do it on occasion, but she felt very disconnected from that part of herself. And in trusting that her voice carried all this medicine within it, because she also came from the classical background where there was a lot of judgment around like, oh, you have to sing what's on the page. If it's not on the page, then it's not perfect or something, instead of just allowing the voice to speak for itself, which is what you do more in sound. And you're a beautiful example of that too. So what happened to her is that as she was working with me through this process, she started to develop her own ways of working with sound. She started to DJ again. She started doing a lot of her own sound events. And she actually then went to Google and she recreated her job to be way more creative. So she actually stepped into that space at Google, and she completely reinvented her job there, because she thought at some point, well, maybe I need to leave and do something else. And instead, the way that she shifted the story, she actually was able to stay in a role and make the role more suited to something that made her happier and more creative and more bringing her voice into the space. So it translated for her in both ways. So she went through this process, and she credits me for changing her life. So I take it she changed her life. I held the space for her to change her life. But just giving her the tools to get to the other side of it, that now she has a very different experience in her life. And then the other client, and as I said, in terms of working with mantras, there is a purge element to it. So when you do a mantra for 40 days, this is not something I invented. This is an ancient practice of doing a mantra 108 times for 40 days. And if you read any books on mantra practices, on the way that they've been used historically, that's known and said to be the amount of time it takes for a neural pattern to reset itself fully is 40 days, which is why they say that's the case. And then this is the mala beads, and the mala beads are 108 beads on there. I'm sure all of you have seen a set of these. Some of you probably worked with them before. So you do them once a day, one round a day of the mantra. But what happens is, as I said earlier, is that you have a little bit, like if any of you have done detox diets or cleanses or something, there is a healing crisis portion of the mantra. And I worked with many mantras over the years, and each time there is a bit of a purge. There are the lessons. There are things that show up in your life to teach you what you need to learn. And having a guide as you're going through that process, I've found for myself is very helpful. And so I hold that space for the people I work with as well, because I help them with developing the essence of those mantras. And this particular client, in that process of the purge element of the mantra, she had probably to this day the most intense experience of any of the people I've worked with thus far. And as she was moving through it, there was just a lot of her childhood trauma and things that have been completely suppressed that she didn't remember, things that came up to the surface. And what happens is that when you push down your emotions and feelings, and when you pretend they're not there, and you're living life from this survival mechanism of how you lived through the trauma, then all of those feelings, they didn't go away. They just haven't been listened to. And so when the body starts talking to you, or your voice isn't being fully expressed, or something's happening, they all, and then all of a sudden you're deciding to shift whatever that survival mechanism was. What happens is not that it goes away, it's that it all comes up in your face to shift and change. And so she went through a very hard probably 4 weeks as she was doing the mantra, and she still practiced every day. She still did it every day. She was very diligent about it, but there was a point where she was very went into feeling very depressed and very sad. And, I always am very if something feels too much, then go see a medical doctor, always very much holding that space for people. I'm not a medical doctor, very clear about that with people, but she managed to push through. And now she's recording her first album. She's sharing her songs all the time. She's happier. She moved. She has a view of the beach from her apartment. She has jobs coming in. She was going through all of this stuff with money. And it was just understanding that part of the process. And she had such a major shift in her life that I just keep telling her, this was 2 years ago. And I saw her recently. She's also a beautiful makeup artist. And I was just so proud of her for pushing through. And she was just reminded, she's like, wow, that one day I felt like I was crying for things that happened, for my entire childhood. And I was like, yeah, it's just it needs to get out. And you always want to think of those voices as that, it is a child. It's your child. It's you, a part of you that's inside. And when that child was suppressed or silenced or not heard, it's still in you until you have the opportunity to be seen and heard at whatever stage you're ready to. And it is work. Transforming patterns is work, as you know, is it isn't a quick fix. Unfortunately, if we could wave the magic wand and all be healed by everything, and it's not even, I see people as healed. It just kind of, we're here to evolve as beings, as to learn. And so it's more an evolution of learning deeper things, of having deeper understanding of the whys, of deeper understanding of each other, and really finding that deep compassion with each other and love in our exchanges is where that process happens. And I find it always begins with the voice.
And it's important as well. I love that you keep talking about it. It is a process, and sometimes that process isn't comfortable.
Oh no.
And that's how, most of the time it's not comfortable. But within that discomfort, it's important to share with people that that's a beautiful sign that a transformation or healing is actually taking place in your life. There's expansion and evolution happening. So that discomfort that you're experiencing is really denoting change.
Yeah, for sure. And I always say, I also, each week, I say this in front of my sound baths too, as I'm introducing, if something uncomfortable comes up, just breathe through it, because sound also, it's opening a portal and it's bringing up the subconscious that wants to be processed. It's not making you worse. It's bringing up what's suppressed so that it can release. And I think sometimes people have, because especially with holistic healing in general, sometimes it can feel worse before it gets better. And sometimes it is just those day or two of process, and sometimes it's an evolutionary process. But it's literally letting go. And I remember the first time I did a juice fast, and this was probably 13 years ago or something. And I had strep throat in a month prior to doing this juice fast. And I had all the symptoms of strep throat for a day. And the person working with me was very clear that this is just letting it go from your system. So just allow, sit through the symptoms, it will pass. And it did. It passed within a day or two, and I was fine. And so but you have to have the patience to sit through it, and that's the uncomfortable piece of it, right? And so I think that's the piece that a lot of people can be into week 2 or something, and they're like, this whole mantra thing, it just doesn't work for me. I'm feeling worse. I'm feeling worse. I'm like, no, it's actually working. It's supposed to do that. And and that's why, in terms of that, it is important to, and once you've done it on your own once and you understand the process, then you can do it. And if you've done a lot of spiritual work, you can absolutely step into that process anytime that you choose. You just have the tools that you understand. And now I'm at a point where it's so second nature to me that I laugh about it when it shows up. And I can just be like, oh yeah, that mantra purge. Hi, what you doing? Like, what do you want now? Because you just develop tools where you have this sense of humor about how I see like the universe and spirit works. And I can share this very, very funny story that happened a couple years ago. Was it like 3 years ago? I decided, I was like, okay, I'm starting this year. And I had for a number of years wanted to do the mantra, the Kundalini mantra. It was So Perk. And it's basically this mantra that takes 30 minutes to recite 11 times. It's a very long mantra, and I would listen to the recording of it. It's not the easiest to pronounce. I had to kind of practice it. And I ended up doing it for more than 3 months and a good chunk of the year. But the purpose of it was to heal your relationship karma, bring in divine partnership, and heal the masculine. And so I was like, yeah, I'm ready for my partner. I'm going to do this, whatever. And so maybe 5-6 weeks in, this friend of mine, who's not a particularly close friend, but he just sent me a random message on Instagram and said, I have this singing bowl, and it's a grumpy singing bowl. It doesn't really want to be played, and I just feel like it wants to go to a home where it's going to get some use and not be like, because we just can't get it to play. And I was like, okay, sure. And so we met for lunch, and ended up going, and he's talking about the singing bowl, and he said, wow, the singing bowl, just so you know, he's called the singing bowl it was very specific, and said, yeah, he is very grumpy and really needs a feminine energy to help heal him. And you might have to coax him and talk to him and do the thing. And I was like, really? And I just started laughing. And I told him about the mantra. And he also thought that was pretty funny. And so I didn't get the partner at that time, but I got a singing bowl that needed healing from the divine feminine. So it was kind of a humorous way that the universe was working with me. And so I've had a lot of those experiences over the years. And I think sometimes I look at it as the universe wants to test your resolve about the thing, and also I think likes to be funny. So, that's just one example of my own process around it that I still find hilarious. And it's all about finding the humor in our process. And when we can do that and find the amusement in the process, that's when we really start to shift.
Beautiful. Well, if you would, can you share a little bit about how you utilize mantra in your own personal practice? And then I'd love if you could just share an experience for our listeners of what that looks and sounds like.
Absolutely. So I'll do two things. I have, like I said, my set of mala beads here. There are a lot of really great places that make mala beads, and you can find them. This particular one comes from Meru Beads, Meru beads, and they're a really great company because they hand tie these, and I just like the quality of their beads, but you can find them on Amazon or anywhere else. So when I was working recently, I'm actually teaching practitioners to do the work I do right now, my first cohort, and I have 10 amazing women that are training to do this work as well, which makes me very happy and blessed, feel very blessed. And so what I was going to also choose my mantra, because part of it was that, okay, I'm going to go through this process again that I developed myself and just see where I am now in relation to where I was. And so it actually took me 2 weeks to figure out what my personal mantra was going to be. And part of it was that I noticed I had some old feelings about stuff that were surfacing. And this is kind of just a guideline, and also like my own vulnerable share. It was like, oh, wow, I just see some of those self-critical voices or comparison things coming up. And I don't really like that. I thought those were kind of gone. And what is it that I'm judging? Judging, oh, I should have done such and such by this age, or I should have done this, or like I haven't done enough, or I haven't figured this thing out yet. And so it was a lot of self-judgment that was coming up into the space. And I realized that, and I was doing it, I was like, oh, maybe it's I am confident sharing my gifts, or maybe it's I'm confident singing, or whatever it is. And I was like, it's not quite right, because I am confident with my gifts, I'm confident with my voice. And so I realized, as upon a lot of soul searching and meditating on it, it took me 2 weeks this time, which is the longest it's taken to decide which mantra felt right for me. And I came up with, I am at peace with my journey. And so that's the mantra that has really like kind of been infiltrating my being that I've been working with. And I found that when I've developed mantras in English, or if I work with a lot of people in other countries, and so it ends up sometimes being in their native language, and I'm totally, whatever resonates with the person is the most important. But just getting to the essence, because I realized that all of these thoughts were related to me judging that my journey should be different than it is. So, and I find that every mantra has a slightly different rhythm. And what I encourage people to do, and all of you to do, if you want to do this practice, I also have a 42-day e-course that comes to you every day that's available on my website too. And you can just follow the protocols in the e-course. It's super easy to start this process yourself and have some guidance around it. So in this case, it's like I'm at peace with my journey. And the way when I started chanting this with myself, I kind of just allow whatever it wants to be. And sometimes it changes as I'm chanting it. Sometimes it'll be like there was one mantra that was actually a Sanskrit mantra, the Kleem, K-L-E-E-M, that I worked with for a 40-day process. And it was just that word. And it wanted to come through really slowly. So it would be like, Helane. So it actually took me quite a long time to get through the 108, but I was like, that's what the mantra wants. I'm going to just feel into what it wants. And it can be whatever melody comes through to you. I don't really, there's some of the Sanskrit mantras that may have some specificity, but I really encourage people to listen to what feels right for them. So when I came to I'm at peace with my journey, it started coming out really fast. And so I was like, okay, I guess this is how it's going to be. And I was like, and what was interesting to me about it when I was reflecting is that I've started to drop more into playing the drums recently. And so it was like, it was just more rhythm. So this is how it was coming out. I was like, I'm at peace with my journey. 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 And I was like, oh, it's so percussive. That's just how it wants to come out. And then it was like really fast to get through the 108 times. And I was like, okay, that's how it wants to come out. So it's like you kind of feel into it. It's the same way that I teach how do you sing with the instruments. Well, ask the instrument how it wants to be sung with. Ask how it wants to be heard. Like it's very much like I talk to my instruments all the time. I'm like, oh, hey, what do you want to do today? Like, what sound do you want to create? And so it's kind of the playfulness with the instrument, with the voice. Like you really want to play. And it was definitely something that for years, even with the piano, that I felt very disconnected from just the play. It was all about, oh, I need to learn this piece and I need to do this and da da da. It was very regimented. So in this process, you can really break free. And so what I can show you too is just the way that I approach just singing bowls in general. I'm just going to take a sip of water. So if I'm singing with the singing bowl, I may ask like today, okay, and I work with a lot of different kinds of singing bowls, and this one is an etched Tibetan bowl, so it's made to be in the heart chakra. And if you've noticed, Tibetan bowls tend to be slightly off of the true tone Western tuning system. So that's a whole topic for another time. But because that can go into a lot of information. I do teach sound healing trainings if you're curious about learning more about that. But I'll just show you. When I'm connecting with the bowl, I'll just do a short vocal transmission. And basically what I'm doing is just tuning in to all of you that will be watching in the quantum space and to Phyllis and whatever just wants to come through in this moment. So I'll just do a brief demonstration of how I would set the space with my voice. So you can just take a deep breath in and close your eyes. And just go ahead and sigh out. Ah. Take a deep breath in sigh. Ah. And one last deep breath in. Sighing it out. Just allowing yourself to, for these next brief moments, be in a complete state of receiving. And just taking a deep breath in and sighing it out. When you're ready, opening your eyes.
Thank you. That was beautiful. I found myself thinking before you ended there, and you kind of pinged the bull, was how just listening to someone express their open and liberated voice has such an effect on aspects of oneself where you're feeling like a restriction or something. And I'm not sure if I'm stating that as eloquently as a thought flowed through my mind, but it was like, wow, there's a deeper sense of not just hearing her voice, but kind of hearing where her voice is coming from, if that makes any sense.
It does.
Or the space that your voice is coming from.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that, Phyllis. It's absolutely my intention is to inspire people to open that space for themselves as well through example. And so I really appreciate that you received that too, because I was really in that moment. I was just like, oh, we just want to play. What's going to come through? And so yeah, I was just feeling like light and fun and free, and sometimes it's way more intense, as you know, and so this was just what wanted to come through today. It's like just really this element and in my own also transformational process, and just to, you know, any of you that are in any kind of really deeper struggle right now, I stand here as an example that it is possible to get to the other side of that. And I definitely have been in a lot of struggles in this life, emotionally, mentally, physically, and it is possible to get to that joyful space. It takes a lot of work sometimes. It took me a long time. And I just want to like stand here and, you know, just say it is possible. Just delve in. And if you pray and you choose, it may be work, it may be challenging at times, but it's not really as challenging as staying in a place where you don't feel like you're the full expression of yourself. Like it's worth it. That's all I'll say. It's worth it to go through the challenges, because when you get to the other side, you'll be like, oh my God, I didn't know this was here. Like, wow, I can have fun and play all day, like whatever you do. And that's the thing. It doesn't really matter what you do for your job. It's this it's the energy of how you're affecting yourself and how you're translating to others. And it all comes through how you use your voice.
Well, and it's important because that epiphany, it was just kind of like that message that, it's not really important. The voice itself isn't important. It's where the voice is coming from and coming through that's actually important. And it kind of goes back to people saying, I can't sing.
Yes.
I'm a closet shower singer or something.
I always challenge people on that one.
Yes, exactly. And I think that just struck me when I was listening to you. So given then what you've shared with us today, what we've talked about, what is one thing you'd like to leave our listeners with that you feel will allow them to take the next step, or to make the next step in their lives, or to make a change?
Yes, absolutely. I would say you can do it. Like, that's the first thing, is just you are capable. You are capable of becoming your fully empowered self. You just have to choose to do it, and you have to be ready for change. And because the real truth is that if you start on this process and things break down, my whole career broke down when I started shifting and changing, and that was necessary for me to get to this place. And I would say, standing here now, it was absolutely 100% worth it. And because I wasn't happy. I wasn't in the full expression of what I was meant to be doing. And so I totally hear you. I totally understand the fear. And you just have to sit and ask yourself, are you ready to move through the fear so that you can feel empowered? It doesn't mean your career is going to change. It doesn't mean all those things. But if it's not resonating with the highest being that you are, I think what I would just say is like a level of encouragement that all of you have the power to step into this process. And in terms of just, I have a lot of resources in my book and stuff that you can get through my website that are very inexpensive, and you can start on the process just that way. You can just delve in. If it's with someone else, delve in wherever you feel called, because I very much encourage, whether you feel called to study with me or study with someone else, like, we all have our gifts to share. And like, I think we learn from everyone. So I think it's really important, if you feel the calling to like move through with your voice, start where you're able to start right now, and be open and welcome to embracing and letting in the power of your voice, because everyone has it. We all have it. You have it.
Would you like to share, anything quickly about opportunities you have for our listeners, like upcoming workshops, events, or programs that you have?
Yes, absolutely. I have an online sound healing training coming up in August, the 2 weekends in August, middle August and the end of August, which you can find on my website. I have a number of live events and live streams that will be coming up. They're not all on the website yet, but they will be coming up. And I also do work with people one-on-one, and I take them through the program. And so, yeah, I offer free discovery calls for anyone that's interested in just learning about my work. There's no pressure or obligation. It's just to connect with you and see where you are. And I can share more about that in my 6-week voice program that's one-on-one, and also tell you more about the Vocal Alchemy Practitioner Training Program that our first cohort will be coming to completion in October this year. And I just look forward to connecting with all of you, because there's just so much that's still unfolding. And the last little tidbit is that it's my very exciting news that I have that's coming up. So I've been working on an actual, like, a dance track that is mantra based since the end of January, and it's based on Kali mantra. And it's very dear to my heart, because I also have a really extensive movement and dance practice in my space. And so I will be sharing that information and that track very soon. So you can stay tuned for that too.
Beautiful. Well, Thank you so much for your time today, Helene. And it was so wonderful sharing with you and hearing more about your journey and your process and what it is that you do. And I want to thank all of you listening today. Thank you so much for being a part of this beautiful session.
Oh, thank you so much, Phyllis, and thank you, Shift Network, for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you.